So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. As we promised you on a great day of information. Well, moving on with that, we're excited that we've got a tech talk on faking it, stopping impersonation attacks with cyber AI. Well, we're looking at talking about how to discover AI has developed being used offensively by threat actors, learning how to use defensive AI to spot subtle threats. Also, hear about more real life examples of how cyber AI can distinguish between threatening and a simple anonymous activity. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by our speaker, Mariana Pereira, Director of Email Security Products, Darktrace. Well, Mariana, being the Director of Email Security Products at Darktrace with a primary focus on the capabilities of AI cyber defenses against email-borne attacks. Well, Mariana works closely with the development analysts and marketing teams to advise technical and non-technical audiences on how best to augment the cyber resilience within the email domain and how to implement AI technology as means of defense. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this, I present to you Mariana Pereira on your stage and screen. Thank you, Mariana, for joining us. How are you doing?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Over to you, Mariana.
Thank you so much. And good morning. Yes, indeed, artificial intelligence, there is no doubt in my mind that will dramatically shape and continue also to change the cybersecurity landscape for the attackers as well as for the defenders. In today's presentation, we're going to look at some real life example of incidents that have gotten past legacy security solutions. And also we'll do a little bit of future gazing to see what those cyber attacks of the future might look like. So let's jump right into it. For those of you who are not familiar with Darktrace, we are a cybersecurity company founded in 2013 by mathematicians. And nowadays, of course, apply our AI to just about every industry out there. We have over 4,000 customers that are relying on this AI to defend some aspect of their business. And why is that? Well, definitely, I think between ransomware and different attack types, what we're seeing is that cybersecurity has dominated the risk profile and the risk analysis, I think, of just about every business. And of course, with it playing out so much in the news headlines, there is no one, I think, that is not aware of the challenge ahead of us. But 94% of all cyber attacks actually starts with an email. So that's 9 out of 10 of every one of these headlines, every story, every friend that you hear saying to you, yeah, I think I might have been hacked. Start with asking, did you receive a weird email? So what does this mean? Well, first of all, it does point to the fact that attackers are aiming at the weakest link in an organization. And of course, that is us humans. And these emails can be everything from somebody promising you endless love and a happy life to something cute on the internet that you just need to click. Of course, we're all familiar with the traditional, here's an invoice that urgently needs payment. But we've actually also started seeing the first hallmarks now actually relevant and a concern for most of us, and definitely for me and my teams today. So first off, let's just have a quick look at AI that is out there. One of the biggest challenges of artificial intelligence is, of course, to pass off as human. This article here that I have on the screen, this is an article that was published in The Guardian last summer. It was authored by GPT-3, which is, of course, an open AI project. GPT-3 is now widely used in different areas. We've seen, of course, AI or automated text messages for everything from reviewing products on Amazon.com to creating fake profiles on social media. Well, traditionally, these have been kind of easy to spot when a machine had created them. But a text like this editorial piece, I think, is it's a lot harder. This is a much more sophisticated piece of research, a very sophisticated AI that is doing a very good job at emulating that which is the human essence, including things like being sarcastic. So if you haven't read it yet, I do encourage you all to read it. It is, I think, a very interesting concept that this AI has been able to generate a creative piece of text. For those of us who then think, well, yes, but text is actually quite straightforward and AI can reshuffle text and make it look like something. GPT-3 has also been responsible for sentences such as this one. It takes 2 rainbows to jump from Hawaii to 17. Well, is this an abstract concept? Is this an AI that's gone rogue? It's difficult to tell, but if we were in a poetry setting, I would challenge you and say that this is actually a very interesting concept as far as the artistic expression goes. When, again, back to that challenge of saying, yes, Mariana, but these are words, these are static things. These are things that the computer can learn how to manipulate with natural language processing. It's like, yes, absolutely. But we see time and time again, then the AI world does some phenomenal jumps in its capacity. In this next example, here is a painting that has actually been created by an AI. Actually, it was created by 2 AIs. And this is what was created by something known as a GANs, a generative artificial network. So there you have here 2 AIs essentially doing battle with each other. The first AI is taught the essence of the great masters of what it means to paint and paint beautifully. And the second AI is being taught to be a detector, or the discriminator, to be technically correct. And the discriminator is trying to say whether or not an image that it is presented, it is true AI, it is a true painting, or whether or not it's an AI trying to paint. And so these 2 AIs do battle. The painting AI and the detecting AI will go rounds and rounds and rounds, and images generated, the discriminator makes a judgment. And every time one of the AIs wins a bout over the other, it learns from the previous bout. So this is a painting that was created in 2018, where we also saw that summer the portrait of Edmund Bellamy fetch an enormous amount, over $400,000 at auction, showing us, I think, undoubtedly that not only there is a market for these creations. I personally would be very happy to have this painting hanging here in my office, but also that it has been confirmed that there is a market for the output. Certainly there is a market for these technologies, because these are then the technologies that can be weaponized in an AI-powered attack. Let's switch gears a second and go back to email, but let's remember what we've just learned. What we have here is a classic example. It's a Twitter exchange actually between a user on the left-hand side, Eleonora, who says, my work account has been hacked and I'm dealing with a situation right now. Please do not respond to any email you received about an invoice. I cannot apologize enough for this. Unfortunately, Eleonora has had something happen to her, which happens way too often. Her business email account was compromised, and it was now being used to launch a further attack using her identity. It doesn't matter that the email itself didn't sound like Eleonora, or it didn't behave like Eleonora traditionally behaves. Many people will still be fooled and will still open that email, trusting that sender, recognizing this as a legitimate business contact. Fortunately for Kaj and the team over at SOCFIN UK, on the right-hand side, we were actually in the middle of doing a proof of value with SOCFIN UK. And Kaj responds to the tweet saying, we're currently trialing Darktrace and Gina, and it successfully identified this email to be highly anomalous for you and blocked it. This, to me, is just one of so many of these interactions that we have with our customers and with our prospects and with our partners. And it encapsulates with these 2 stories what I am very fearful of the future and what we are starting to see, which is this rise of digital fakes. These are emails that are compelling. They are sent from a believable source. And I would say they encapsulate it in this impersonation attack. They are faking that identity. And we see this also play out so well when the verification methods themselves fail. So yes, you should have verification methodologies. You should try to make it difficult for somebody to impersonate your users, but it happens. And you need to also have a mechanism by which it's not left to the humans that are receiving the emails alone to make a judgment call as to whether or not that email is legitimate or it's a fake. The reason for this shift really is that if last year we saw the beginnings of the fearware campaign around COVID, especially in the February-March timeframe, as new domains were being registered en masse, campaigns were being sent out en masse, what we're seeing in 2021 instead is the beginnings of this trustware, almost, if you want. A lot of attacks and attackers that are leveraging the trusted relationship between sender and recipient. And it is impossible for a human alone to tell whether or not that email was written by a human or by a machine. To some extent, it doesn't even matter whether or not it was created by a machine or by a human, as long as the recipient believes it to be true and clicks. So these attacks are being spread out en masse, and also highly researched and highly targeted. This means that they're targeting anyone within our community. It could be somebody that is trying to impersonate you or trying to impersonate somebody you are familiar with. We need to be on the lookout, and simply looking isn't going to be enough. What it means for the attacker then when we put all of these technologies together? Well, first of all, remember all of those marketing emails that we've been receiving with unmissable campaigns, and sometimes there are very good targeting, suggested copywriting, suggested subject lines. Well, those same technologies that are helping email marketers are also what are going to be helping the offensive attackers to use artificial intelligence. The copy editing, the subject line, that's just the beginnings. Once inside our environment, these sophisticated bits of AI can also self-propagate, look for the next steps, blend more easily into the target environments, so that the time frame between initial compromise and attack is lost in the noise of day-to-day business. This is why we need to change the way that we're looking at cybersecurity. No longer asking ourselves whether or not something is threatening and whether or not it can come in the first place, but really change that. And I would submit that most cybersecurity tools are still asking the wrong question. They're asking whether or not something is good or bad. And that binary sense of the world just doesn't work. We cannot be training our humans to fit the way that a machine sees the world. We need to be changing the machine so that it understands what the human world is like. Not by asking whether something is good and bad, but asking whether or not it belongs. For us to be able to understand belonging, this is where the whole system comes together. How do you understand if an email is fake? Well, I would say you need context. You need to understand that it doesn't belong given the context of the business or given the users themselves. For you to do this, and for us to do it, what Darktrace has done is we've inspired ourselves on the human immune system. Certainly one of the most advanced defense mechanisms that exists on this planet, evolved over thousands of billions of years to be able to understand when something gets past our outer perimeter, our skin, to get inside our ecosystem and represents a threat. And much like the human immune system, we need to be able to respond in an autonomous fashion. That is, the immune system decides when to respond, not our brains. Similarly, the AI needs to decide, needs to have the capability of deciding and the agency to decide and respond when something is going wrong or when something represents a threatening behavior. It's out of character. It needs to be able to step in. And out of character, of course, means anything new on a new day. Not to say that new means threatening, but something that is new, that is unknown. You don't have the information to be able to make a judgment call on whether it's good or bad. That's why you need that context, to be able to put it in the context of the business and of the users and of the life cycle of the devices, what we call the pattern of life, to be able to step in and protect the business even from zero-day threats or never before seen domains or links. And of course, we need to do this across the entire ecosystem. The walls have fallen, and the idea that businesses are defined by a finite network had already been on the way out. Now, with working from home, migration to the cloud, projects that have accelerated dramatically, shared network responsibility, the digital estate sprawls well beyond that sort of easily defined perimeter. And so you need something that is able to understand beyond that perimeter and understand all of those interactions, no matter where in the digital ecosystem they're being played out. Now, I promised you a real case, and here it is. This is an attack that was found at a company in Australia. Here, one of their suppliers had been compromised, and a very large volume of emails were being sent in, actually following a pattern. The senders had a domain, and so we've graded out here for privacy reasons, but the senders were following a recipe, as I was saying. So the sending domain matched RFP4 sending domain, and these were different. That's why we're seeing different threat scores. So there was a sending domain for first address into the subject line, second address into the subject line, and that indicates to me that this campaign was somehow automated. Somebody set up a rule. There was a very widespread campaign. This may or may not have been the only victim. But what happened then is once the emails were opened, and here they had been, there was a link that is copied down here on the right-hand side, a link that says the document August 2020 requirements for detailed information. This was the display text. Behind this link, behind this display text, there was a very, very unusual link that promised to be the request for proposal. Now, here what's happened is that we were doing a proof of value, but unlike with SOCFIN UK, the AI was in passive mode. So we see the little target symbols here showing us that the AI wanted to intervene, but because it was in passive mode, it wasn't allowed to intervene. And that's why this attack played out. All of these emails had been opened. We can see it here from the little green envelopes. And somebody had clicked on the link, a friend of ours who is called Paul. So Paul was presented with this login screen. For security reasons, he had to log back in. Now you know what's coming next. This wasn't a legitimate SharePoint site. This was a credential harvesting website. When Paul inputted his username and password, he handed over his login credentials to the attackers, which then used it to gain access. For those of you who are also noticing the dates, the first emails were received on the 10th, 11th of August. We're now on the 12th of August. Having had access to Paul's credential, the attacker starts looking and researching and doing steps to allow themselves the rules, to create rules to allow their next behaviors not to be triggered by any kind of alarm. But of course, the AI is watching, and the AI noticed that this was unusual for Paul. And when Paul's email accounts then sent out 1,685 emails in a 25-minute window the next day, this set off the AI to say, yet again, this is very unusual. Hey, humans, you might want to have a quick look at this. With that, I'd like to thank you for your participation today. Again, my apologies for the confusion with the time zones, but thank you for bearing with and having waited. And yes, that's all. I think we're going to go on to either a panel or I'm not sure yet, but back to you, back in the studio.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mariana, for joining us today at the World Cybersecurity Summit. We absolutely valued your presence today. Thank you once again.